Здравейте всички, аз съм Любо, а това е поредното ни събитие онлайн. Надявам се, че ни гледате в добро психическо и физическо здраве и че активно се подготвяте за този постапокалиптичен сценарий, в който рязко влизаме. Ние продължаваме с нашите опити да правим принудително онлайн съдържание. Да се вика днеска, аз и лектора ще стримваме отново от холовете си. Днес ще си говорим за начина, по който нацяло ние хората се справяме с кризисни ситуации, с начин, по който тревожност ни влияе, с това как ни променя ежедневието нацяло, как ограничението влияят върху психиката ни, как факта, че трябва да виждаме ние същи хора, включая хората, които имат деца или близки, с които живеят, знаят болезнено вече от последните месеци нещо, че това не винаги е особено лесно. Също така ще засегнем някои теми, които са свързани с така да се каже, по-странни вярвания в момента, т.е. по време на такъв тип изолация, дали хората са по-склонни да вярват в неща, които не са ужасно доказани или са по-скоро конспиративни и малко кринджи. Нещо питаме да влезем в някои от тези теми. Евентуално ще също да минем в частта, където да дадем някои препоръки за начин, по който адекватно да се справяме с нивата на тревожност и прочее, които се появяват в такъв тип странни ситуации. Днес сме заедно с доктор Брайан Шарплес. Брайан е клиничен психолог с интереси към абнормална психология и психотерапия. Той има вече над 40 публикувани труда, има 3 книги написани. Книгите се казват Sleep Paralysis, Historical, Psychological and Medical Perspectives, Unusual and Rare Psychological Disorders и Psychodynamic Therapy Techniques. Той също така е спикър на серия събития по света и у нас. Сега може би по-интересното за мен е, че той вече е бил на 2 събития при нас последните 2 години, през лятото и 2 пъти. Така че бих казал, че Брайан е един от по-интересните ни лектори. Той е доста анимиран, сега ще видите и вие, доста забавен и бих казал и щипка странен, което го прави още по-интересен, поне за мене. Нямам търпение да намеря неща, за които го зачепкам, за да го видите това. И мисля, че това е горе-долу това. Мисля, че вече е време да започнем разговора ни на английски, да го включим вече и Брайан. Hi, Brian.
Hello.
What's up? Hey, man.
It's
What's
good
up?
to be back at Raccio.
Hey, you majestic, bold friend.
Seeing double again.
Exactly. Yes. Well, if somebody is looking at us at the same time, it looks like a time machine happened at some point, but you're not really sure which is the present self and the future self and which is better.
Or evolution.
I think
possibly,
they equally was. So the evolution. So how are you coping with the current situation? Are you making still some Shara Naso and Banica?
What situation? Something going on I don't know about? Yeah, it's I think it's a little bit worse in the US than it is in Bulgaria right now.
About 500,000 was, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm in DC. We haven't peaked quite yet. I think our peak's going to happen next week, but it's a little strange to see the hospitals that are across the street from you having big tents set up, anticipating people coming. So yeah, we'll see. But I've been doing all right. Gives me a lot of time to write.
Yeah, I'm guessing your practice has changed a lot during this last few weeks. I mean, you're probably seeing people online right now?
Yeah, it moved completely online. So I still see the same number of people, but it's completely done through Zoom, which is very strange. It's not as bad as I thought it would be, but it is a little different. But I'm getting used to it. But yeah, it's only bad if there's internet connection drops. So.
Yeah, well, at least you don't have to have more than one person on the call, which is usually the actual disaster. When somebody just disconnects for 15 minutes and just comes back and is like, what did you guys talk about? Is this, does my mic work? Something technology.
Or you get bombed. I heard they're doing some Alcoholics Anonymous groups online now using Zoom, and people have been hacking in and like yelling mean things like "drink" to the people.
Jesus.
I'm serious. Yeah. So it's
So
They
is
even
it, is
hacked
it,
into an academic conference, and where someone put a very funny, I won't say what it was, very funny name, and it said, "This really funny name joined the call," and the speaker's just like, "Yeah, we're just stopping."
Jesus, Jesus, yeah. It's, well, digital shenanigans, man. It's the internet. What can you
Yep.
expect? So, I mean, it's interesting how does this actually change your practice right now? Does it is it more difficult to actually gauge people's responses based on, limited amounts of verbal cues and just gestures, etc., or is it basically cleaner this way?
I think it's a little harder because I mean, what you're seeing of me right now is what I see of my patients and what they see of me. So I have no idea what the rest of their body's doing, and we do have to pay attention to all the nonverbal cues that are going on during session. Some people might not have giveaways that they're having reaction just in their face or from the chest up. They might start shaking their leg. They might start fidgeting with their hands, and I can't see what's going on. But in general, I mean, I can see about 90% of what I need to see.
Mm.
And, as long as I can see them, it's been very hard. One of my patients is very resistant to doing video conferencing because of the nature of their job, and they're afraid of being seen or hacked. So it's been completely telephone. That's been very challenging. So I don't have
Yeah.
anything other than voice to really go on.
Yeah, I can
But
imagine that being a disaster. So it's
yeah,
basically a secret agent that you're treating.
I don't want to go into it, but yeah, he could come
Yeah, of
after you.
course. Yeah,
Yeah.
he probably has already. So I mean, let's really get into it. We've been in some form of quarantine, like a variation, for the last month and a half, basically.
Mhm.
This has varying effects on people. I mean, I can see it with some of my friends, some colleagues, etc. Some are handling it amazingly,
Mhm.
even better than regular life. In fact, I mean, I'd like to say that I'm in that category right now. But you have people that are getting much more psyched because of isolation, because of living with the parents, or just living with two kids and just having to be with two kids
Yeah.
throughout the day, every day for weeks, which is, yeah,
To me, that
probably
sounds like
not
a nightmare because
ideal.
I don't have kids. So yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
would you, brother?
Mhm.
So, I mean, could this be summarized in some shape or form as a kind of troubled state for those people, or is it some kind of a source of just specific anxiety or fear or something else? I mean, how does this situation look like from the perspective of somebody that's not handling it perfectly?
Yeah. Well, the long and short of it is it's complicated. So as you said, we're seeing widely different reactions to this stuff. And there are a lot of variables that go into that. So we don't have really good data on what's happening now with COVID. The next few months, we're going to see some incredible studies, I think. But we do have some information back from the SARS days and of some of the quarantines that happened, which were not nearly as extensive now. And there's so many individual characteristics that people have, certain aspects of their personality, and what we call resilience. I'm actually going to share a slide with you here. Um, so it's probably helpful to talk a little bit about the distinction between solitude and loneliness. So solitude is just essentially being by yourself. And some people spend a lot of money to do this. They spend money to go do trips in the desert where they can literally be by themselves. And for some people, that's amazing. It's reinvigorating. For my job, given that I have to talk to people or and give lectures and things like that, I really appreciate solitude. So it makes me feel recharged when I get solitude. And that's different from what we call loneliness. And that's where we have the sense that something we want is not there. Some
Hmm.
way of connecting to another person is missing. And so, as opposed to being a neutral or a negative state or a positive state, loneliness is a negative state for people. And some people are just inherently more gregarious. There's a lot of biological reasons that people will cope with stress differently. So you can actually breed rats to have them be more anxious. You can breed in what we call high levels of negative affectivity. So let's say a normal rat is going through and here's a loud noise and you're assessing its reaction. So it might
Hmm.
startle like up to here, and then quickly go down. But if you get a specific type of rat called a Maudsley rat, it'll go like this, way higher, and stay up there for longer. Humans are the same way. You can even see these differences in temperament at birth. And so if you're higher in negative affectivity and you have something happen like coronavirus, it can have a far greater impact on you. And then I think what you're really getting at is a kind of a weighty construct in psychology that is a lot of people are interested in. It's called resilience. And this is really the way that people cope with adversity, the way they handle things when, shit really hits the fan and times are really tough. And I mean, this is pretty good example of that.
Textbook definition, yeah.
Yeah. And what we find is that people do vary on their levels of resilience. And the good news is that you can actually increase people's ability to be resilient if they do certain things through therapy and even some self-help techniques. But people that are more resilient tend to be more self-aware. So they tend to have a good sense of what's going on inside of them. If they're getting negative reactions or positive reactions, they can get at them quicker, and they can kind of step outside themselves and look at themselves almost like a scientist, like what's going on right now with you. And those people tend to be better in bad situations. In general, there's a big range between how flexible people are as well, not only just in terms of mental flexibility, in terms of thinking different ways, trying to problem solve, but in terms of their actions and what they do. And the more flexible you are in general, the more resilient you are. Otherwise, you might do the same thing over and over again that doesn't make sense or help you. It's harder to learn the bad things if you don't have that quality.
So I have to follow up specifically on this because I have a tendency to go for the measurable stuff. So I mean, how do you quantify resilience? I mean, how do you measure resilience in somebody? How can you? Because if you say that you can essentially train resilience in a way, end of the day, that means that there's some number somewhere that could be measured. Is it with some kind of test or something?
Yeah, and resilience, it's a big concept, but let's take different pieces. So in terms of mental flexibility, there are some really good tests. You need some special equipment to do them. There are some that are online, some use design, some use blocks, and you can reliably show how people are more or less flexible in terms of trying to create something or problem solving using what we call divergent thinking. So you can test that pretty reliably in the laboratory. Awareness, yeah, that's done through various types of interviews. There are surveys. There's an online program actually. Where is that? It's at a Penn where you can go in and check sort of your ability to detect subtle emotional cues in yourself and other people. So they'll have pictures that have been tested with thousands of subjects, and they show little gradations or big gradations in emotions. And you can tell how good people are at recognizing those things. So there are a number of tests like that. But yeah, resilience is sort of a very broad omnibus construct.
So when we say that you can basically train resilience, I mean, I can largely understand how big crises such as this one, or let's say a financial downturn or the loss of a loved one or something else, could have a severe impact, and it's kind of a truism, right? Because problems and drama creates long-lasting strength under some shape or form, be it in a personal organization, etc.
If you learn something from it, yes.
Yes, it could be. It's a potential to change. But how would you train outside of those conditions without such a stress on you? I mean, what would you do? I mean, just stay at home and be like, oh, it's really, really bad right now. Let's train for this.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking of one of my favorite quotes from the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. If a man has a how, he can put up with any why. Wait, did I get that right? No, if he has a... Anyway, maybe I'm misstating. But essentially, if we have a purpose, we can put up with just about anything.
Yes.
No, if a man has a why, he can put up with any how. That's how it goes.
Okay.
Yeah, my favorite quote that I can't remember. But anyway, so I think that we can really put up with a lot of suffering, objective suffering, if we feel that it has a reason. And part of resilience is really being in touch with your values and what you think is important. And if we know what we think is important, that can really allow us to get through terrible situations. I don't know if many of your listeners have ever read Viktor Frankl's work, Man's Search for Meaning, but he was actually in a death camp. So he had people that he had no control over, had complete life and death control over him for every moment of his life. But he found that he still had freedom in there. And some of the things that he thought were important to do was to be kind to people. That's what he valued. And doing things like that, helping people out that he didn't need to help, can help them get through it. One of my students right now is actually, she's in isolation, just like most of the US. And she started fostering animals that don't have homes, that the shelter didn't have room for, that are going to other places. So this really is something that's very important to her. And it helps make her feel good and feel like she's using this time wisely rather than just sitting around being bored. Another one of my favorite philosophers is Kierkegaard, and he always says, boredom is the root of all evil. And just think about it. When most people get into bad trouble when they're bored and they have nothing to do. And when you've got a pandemic going on, it's really easy to be bored. There's only so many episodes of Tiger King to watch.
Yes.
So
basically, you need to be a bit creative during the periods of boredom or craziness or some kind of limitation. Essentially, you need to find ways to set up a regime or some kind of structure for yourself.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the easiest things you can do. And this is something I'll tell you, I struggle with. Normally, like pre-pandemic, my life was extremely rigid. I would get up at very early, 4:30 a.m. every morning. And I would have a set amount of things to do. And then I'd go to work, I'd see patients, I'd write, do research. With the pandemic, I've noticed my sleep cycle. I got up at 6:50 today. That's very different from me. But partially it's because I don't have a set schedule as much. But I think it's something to try and keep as rigid as you can. So that's one thing that I haven't done as well with sleeping, but other things I have. So I work out 6 times a week. I know you're probably shocked by that. I should look like Chris Holmes' work. I really look like probably Chris Rock. But
I train 6 times a week as well, and we look similar. So
yeah, those are the limitations of genetics. But I do that every single day except one day a week, and I find that incredibly helpful. And what I found really meaningful is trying to use my time to do a lot of writing, and in particular, starting a new book. So I've found the pandemic, it's been stressful in some ways, but I've tried to make it useful. And my tendency is want to kind of be more towards myself. So I've also been reaching out to some friends, some actually. So I've had some pubs, electronic online pubs with Chris French and Alice Gregory and some of my friends from Goldsmiths.
Yeah, that's awesome. We should do that as well, by the way, at some point.
Absolutely. The problem is you're so far ahead, I'd be day drinking, but that's okay.
Yeah, I'm fine drinking at 4 a.m. I mean, I'm fine drinking at 8 p.m. as well. So I'm just saying. So I want to take you back to the question with just coping during this this weird period. How, when you have some kind of an issue, I can imagine it can be exacerbated by some specific physical or mental really existing with you. Let's say you have some additional fear of, let's say, closed environments. You have some kind of anxiety, etc. I'm guessing those things don't really get better. I mean, when you get confronted.
No, anytime you're in a stressful situation, it doesn't even have to be as dramatic as a pandemic, but anytime you're in a stressful situation, those pre-existing problems will tend to get stronger. So if you're anxious, you might be more anxious. If you tend towards depression, you might tend to be more depressed. If you tend to have personality problems that might get you in trouble with other people, narcissism, for instance, which it's probably not fun to be stuck in a house with a narcissist right now. Those things tend to kick back up, and it can be really hard. Yeah. So you see in the SARS data that we have from back then, you saw an increase in whether you had pre-existing anxiety or depression or not. You did see an increase as the isolation kept going. And interestingly, you saw a relation between how close you were to the center of the infection. So let's say that coronavirus was centered in Plovdiv. So the people in Plovdiv would tend to have higher levels of anxiety and increased suicidal ideation than the people in Sofia, because they would be closer to the pandemic. So that was an interesting finding. So even though everybody might be freaked out, the closer you are to the source of the thing that's making you freak out in distance tends to have an impact.
So it's basically, I mean, was this specifically for the SARS pandemic, or is it something that you can see in some specific other cases as well?
I would guess it's more, I would expect that a similar thing is happening in COVID as well, but that we don't have data on COVID yet.
Yeah, because I can imagine other correlations that could affect people's behavior as well. I mean, depending on how localized authorities, for example, are handling the situation. So let's imagine the place of outbreak has some really rigid police curfews and a bunch of other measures that later weren't adopted by anybody else because it arrived there for the first time. It's really it was really unknown. People didn't have the same level of information that, let's say, you and I have when we're thousands of kilometers away from that hot zone. So, I mean, I could imagine that it depends on some other characteristics as well.
Yeah, I'm sure it's multifactorial. Most things are, but yeah, and the problem in the States, at least, is we don't have a lot of uniform stuff. So I have some data from Indiana, which was amazing. So they keep records in a suicide hotline in Indiana. So pre-COVID, they were getting around 1,000 calls a day. COVID started, that went up to 25,000. And I don't have the precise numbers, but I've also heard from several states that domestic calls for domestic abuse and domestic violence have significantly increased as well, which makes sense, right? If you're stuck with people and you might not be getting along pre-COVID, you could leave. Yeah,
more opportunity for conflict, basically.
Yep. And your personality characteristics get intensified, like everybody's on cocaine, and then fights happen.
Everybody, I mean,
no, I said like everybody is on cocaine. Yeah.
You said cocaine and I went dreamy.
I know.
So I'm guessing you're on Facebook as much as anybody else right now. And I mean, you're seeing the same kind of stream of posts about the same thing over and over, whether it's something COVID isn't just the flu, or COVID is just the government's plots to thin the population, or whatever. So, I mean, it's not like I don't see such kind of posts regularly, but at least it's because I'm even on flat Earth groups right now. I mean, I do this to myself sometimes, but it looks like, because this is much more general. This is everybody can have an opinion on it. It's not a niche belief such as something like vampires or werewolves or something. This basically allows for more people to go into conspiracy theories and to go into just batshit country.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and if you set up a few conditions, it can make anybody more likely to believe in conspiracy theories. So generally, if you're in a situation where you have a lot of fear, you're more prone to conspiratorial thinking. But a big one, and this has been shown in several studies that I'm aware of, is if you feel that you don't have control. If you feel that there are things going on that you have no real ability to affect changes on, you will be more likely to engage in a conspiratorial process. And if you think about, it's very hard to define, this is one of the problems in the literature, it's very hard to define what a conspiracy theory is because they're so broad. But in general, we tend to think of ways of thinking in conspiracy. And most conspiracies have a belief that events that are going on are being controlled by powerful people. And these powerful people are kind of interesting because not only are they really evil, they're bad bastards, but they're also really competent. So they're smart and capable and evil. And they you know,
It's
that's a
amazing.
bad combination to have people that are behind the wheel, behind the scenes, like puppet masters. So, but part of the problem is our brains themselves. We have some cognitive biases that seem to be built into us that make pretty much everybody able to be a conspiracy theorist. In fact, if I had to guess, if we weren't taping right now, I'll bet you and I would both come up with at least one conspiracy theory that we really believed was true.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I don't have any illusions that we're immune to this or something like that. We're just not aware of our own limitations, and
exactly.
basically, although I mean, I have to admit, I'd really like to be one of the supervillains that's super competent, and
Hmm.
it just
Just for a day, just for a day, queen
yeah,
for a
just
day.
even if I have to, I don't know, put babies on spikes or something like this
Uh-huh,
for a
uh-huh.
day, maybe. I don't know. I mean, it sounds like a good trade-off.
It certainly wouldn't be as boring as sitting in front of your computer screen for 8 hours a day. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. But
But yeah, but I guess going back to the point, I think we're all conspiracy theorists. So I think it's very easy to kind of use conspiracy theorist as a slur,
yeah,
as a way to just dismiss somebody. And some conspiracies are on the face of them silly, but I think the processes, if we're honest with ourselves, the processes are kind of the similar for all of us. I can go into that with some slides if you want.
sure.
Um,
If you can share your
yeah,
screen.
yeah. Let me get to that. So I found just some funny things first here. So this is from a fake site. Are you seeing it?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. NSA confirms everything is a conspiracy. Conspiracy theorists are not convinced. Um, but we have a
Yeah,
lot of a
that's a
lot
good
of
one.
good research on what makes people more likely to believe in conspiracy theories, and some of them go into demographic characteristics. So men and women don't seem to significantly differ on conspiracy theories, but in the U.S. at least, some of our minority populations seem to be a bit more likely to believe in conspiracies, whether they're racially related or not. But political belief is a big one. So, I mean, I think we can both come up with examples of people on the right or the left that believe in conspiracy theories. And it seems like the farther you are away from the mainstream, the more you're towards the radical right or the radical left. It really doesn't matter which side you're on, you're going to be more prone to believing in conspiracies, which is kind of interesting. And I think we can see lots of examples from news reports and how stories are being covered. So if we're sort of towards the center, right or left of center, we might be insulated a bit from bad conspiracies. And as I said, locus of control is a big one. If you have an internal locus of control, meaning you feel that you are in charge of your life, you are in control of your destiny, and the things that you are doing are related to where you're going to end up, you are insulated from conspiracy theories. If you believe in the reverse, though, that I'm a pawn, I'm sort of like a little cork floating on the waves of the ocean, and all these other things are in control of my life and not me, then you are going to be very much more likely to believe in conspiracy theories. I think the best predictor of conspiracy theories is in research is if the person believes in another conspiracy theory. So if you assess their level of of what they believe beforehand, you can predict very well what they're going to believe in the other parts of the study.
Yeah, it's a package.
Yeah. And here's another package of people that tried to or actually did assassinate a president. But one of the cognitive biases that I think is going like mad right now with COVID is what's called the proportionality bias. So this is where you believe essentially that if a big event happens, it has to have a big cause. Can't happen by chance.
Hmm.
Got to be big. And
It has to have agency.
yeah. We'll get to the agency more in a minute, but so a good example, and I didn't come up with this, was the distinction between Oswald and Kennedy and Hinckley and Reagan. So Oswald obviously assassinated JFK. Hinckley, I don't know how many, if Bulgarians know too much about him, but he tried to assassinate Ronald Reagan to get the love of the actress Jodie Foster. Yes, he did not succeed. He did shoot Reagan, but he did not succeed. So you can look, how many conspiracy theories do you know about JFK? You could probably come up with 10 of them,
Yeah.
Cuba, CIA killed him, mob killed him. You don't see that with Hinckley. And conspiracy researchers would say that this is because, it's not that crazy to believe that a lone gunman tried to assassinating a president and failed. It's a lot harder to believe that a lone gunman actually succeeded in doing that. And you see the same thing with 9/11. So with COVID, I think it's hard to believe that for some people that either it just randomly entered through a disease vector in Wuhan, or it escaped a lab, whatever through chance. If you see how huge this has impacted our lives, I mean, we're all sitting in and staying 6 feet away from each other. If you think about the enormity of that, in the proportionality bias as an operation, then you think there's got to be something more here. Somebody's doing this on purpose. They're trying to take down the government. It's the New World Order. That's what Alex Jones would say, probably.
Lizards.
Yeah. So proportionality bias is a big one. And for my money, the worst part of our cognitive apparatus is confirmatory biases. So this is where you see things that confirm your beliefs and you don't see things that go against your beliefs. So you essentially see what you want to see. And that's another bad one for conspiracies. And people that have strong confirmatory biases will believe in conspiracies more. And then getting to what you were saying earlier, the intentionality bias. So I don't know. I only drove in Sofia once. It wasn't as bad as DC. But I could tell you, I fall prey to this every time I'm on the highway. And this is where you believe that you see agency in things that are going on that are probably accidental. So somebody cuts you off. It's not because they didn't see you. You were in their blind spot. It's because they're an asshole. And they're the stupidest person in the world. And they did that intentionally just to ruin your day. So
sounds logical to me. I mean, that's my experience driving in Sofia. Everybody's an asshole except me.
Exactly.
I'm a kind and gentle soul.
Yeah. You're also deluded, but no. So, but this is another thing. So, if we perceive, again, we're seeing things that could be random as being intended. Then we've got projection. This is another fun one. We deal with this in clinical psychology all the time, but this is where you essentially see what you don't like about yourself and other people. So if you are a selfish person, you tend to perceive other people as selfish instead of you. If you're deep down a manipulative person that will do anything to another person to get ahead in life, you see that in everybody. And these things go all over the place in conspiracies. So I don't want to make a lecture on conspiracy theories here, but I thought those might be fun to help your audience see some of the things that they might be doing or thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, everybody can see this on Facebook in real time right now, literally right now. But another thing that's probably kind of feeds into that effect, you tell me if I've got this right, is part of the idea of believing in conspiracies is not only that there's some agency and there's some attribution that you're doing, but also that you have some information that others don't. So basically, there's some level of competency that you have that basically people that don't believe in what you're preaching, basically, they don't know it for whatever reason, probably because they're dumb as fuck. So that's usually the thinking, right? So I have some secret information due to my superior brain and genes and thought processes. So isn't it kind of tied in with the whole Dunning-Kruger effect of being, essentially really good at knowing a bunch of abstract ideas? I mean, another example that I'll give is, beyond some people believing in conspiracy theories right now, we have also a bunch of people being essentially immunologists, epidemiologists, politicians, economists, competent administrators, etc. Just a huge number of specialists combined in one with expert opinion on all of them. And I mean, I can see the appeal, but I don't know, it looks like the same kind of issue at the core.
Yeah, so I have a slide on this, actually. So this is a good representation of the Dunning-Kruger effect. So if you look around here where you don't have any competence, you tend to have a high level of confidence. So you don't know that you don't know, so you think you know. Anybody that teaches out there will see a lot of this. And these are the students that they think they got a 98 on the test and they actually got a 68, and they're very upset with you because they think you don't know what you're talking about. So if you're kind of in the average where you sort of, you kind of know a little bit about something, whether it's economics or epidemiology, then your confidence is a bit lower. And then if you go to the expert level where you actually do know quite a bit, then your confidence tends to increase, but you'll see it's still not as high as the people who don't know anything. And this is really a big problem when it comes to not only speaking about things, but actually knowing where to get good information. So if you don't know what you don't know, you're very likely to believe the first thing you see, or to stick with whatever little bubble you're in and not go outside and take everything that they say is gospel truth. So the Dunning-Kruger effect is very, very bad. And I think it's probably one of the things that's responsible in the States for people who really are going outside and going to holding illegal nightclubs in their house and doing things like that. I just don't think they have a good sense of things. The opposite of the other side of the Dunning-Kruger effect is that people that are very high in ability, so let's say the top 5% of the class, they tend to underestimate how hard the exam was for other people. So because it was easy for them, they will see it as easy for everybody else. And then there's sort of a disconnect in either direction, either at the high ability level or the low ability level. And there's so many fun things. This is a fake news site, but outbreak of Dunning-Kruger disease spreads to all 50 states. And I mean, I can't tell you the number of emails I get a week that are like this one. It's, yeah. So I read one thing. I read a BuzzFeed article, and let me tell you how to do psychotherapy, or let me tell you about sleep disorders. So
No punctuation.
Yeah, of course not. So it's fantastic. Yeah, so I don't know how to oh, there, I stopped my screen there. Yeah. Okay.
Let me just interject for a second.
Please.
By the way, guys, if you want to ask questions to Brian, go to sleep.do with the code COPING, COPING. So we'll be asking some of those questions in a bit once we finish up with him on the first part. So another bit from that's kind of related to conspiracy theories, kind of related to the Dunning-Kruger effect. I mean, I think it's related in the same way that it's kind of like the vicious triangle is basically fake news right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've already been in a news cycle that's kind of suboptimal. I mean, both polarization and politics in general work wonders to make this an actual hellhole of a place, the current news cycle. But because of COVID, right now we also have an additional line of thinking that basically promotes all those conspiracy theories, allows for people with armchair let's say economy majors, etc., to get their ideas how should I say it, made full in a way. So I think it's probably more important than ever to be able to have some kind of filter. So be able somehow to approach both Facebook and like with all the bullshit that's going on.
Yeah, there was a psychologist named Drummond who came up with a series of questions to ask yourself to help get past fake news. And I think they're a good start. I would add a couple more pieces. But one of the things, do you recognize the organization that actually posted the story, or did some idiot on the internet just post this and cobble together something? So I think that's important. Also, I think it's good to try and think like a scientist again. And does this actually make sense? A lot of things in life are possible, but is this really probable? So, does it make sense? And I think you also need to kind of go into the stylistic stylistics of the writing. So in how it's actually being written, does it seem like what you would expect from a professional news organization? Can you tell that the person doing the writings, do they seem to know what they're talking about, or is it just gibberish? And the trickiest one, the fourth question to ask yourself from Drummond was, is the post politically motivated? And that's, I think, the trickiest part right now, because I'm sure it's very similar over there. It might not be as bad in Bulgaria as the States, but we see such radical polarization. I have trouble finding news sources that aren't politically motivated, and bias is in everybody. So it's really tough. So the question, what I would suggest is to use Drummond's questions, but also make sure you go outside your bubble. You know, if you're always on CNBC or MSNBC, go to other news sources. If you're always on Fox News, yeah, why not? If you're always on Fox News, go to CNBC and MSNBC.
It's a different world, yeah.
It's a different world, and you will see coverage of the same events treated radically differently. And ask yourself again, is what the person's saying probable or just possible? And then if we really want to take the other things I said earlier seriously, confirmation bias, you have to be honest with yourself. So a lot of the things that are involving COVID are politicians, right? Politicians are involved. And I think you really have to be honest with yourself and see if you're kind of using the halo or the horns effect. So where you love the politician so much they can't do anything wrong, so everything they say is gospel truth, or you hate them so much that nothing they do is right and they're a complete idiot. So I think you have to ask yourself, am I splitting? That we call that, when we're treating borderlines and borderline personality disorder, they split a lot. So they tend to see you as all good or all bad. I see people doing that everywhere when it comes to the news and political figures. It's never that simple. Nobody is all good, nobody's all bad. And so I think those confirmatory biases just tend to make it harder to be objective, shall we say.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, that's the same type of question that we discussed for the conspiracy theories. Odds are we've put ourselves into believing organizations or people based on pre-existing judgments already.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising that it's a thing. Okay, let's go back to some of the more practical bits that are happening during this time, because everybody has heard of, let's say, agoraphobia, right? Just being afraid of going outside, meeting people, etc. But do we have something that's let's say for the healthy population, for people who don't have some extremes of a condition, do we have some specific downsides of not being able to go and meet people? Do we have some kind of a serious downside of people not going to the office, not commuting, not just going out for coffee with some random people, not online?
Yeah, and again, we're going to see a lot more of this data coming in the next few months. But in general, it really depends how you cope with it and what you do. So a lot of people work from home pre-pandemic, but they have the option of going out and leaving, so that makes it a lot easier. But I think your perspective is very important. The way I was just thinking about this, but to be honest, like pre-pandemic, I would sit here where I am right now, right? Or go to my office and sit in my chair and talk. So I was in like 8 square meters, 90% of the day. So it's really, if we look at it objectively, it's not that different, but it feels so much more different because I can't go
limitation.
out. Yeah. So I think helping to shift that perspective and keep that in mind might be helpful. But I think if you make attempts to connect with people in non-traditional means, like I said, having electronic pubs with my friends that I can't see, calling people on the phone more, trying to stay off Facebook, because I think that's sort of faux connection. It doesn't really feel, I think it gives people the illusion that they're keeping in touch when they're really not. You know what I mean?
I think that's more of a detriment. Facebook?
I think it gives you the impression that you're keeping close to people when you're really not. It feels
Mm.
fake to me. And I actually have been trying to cut back on Facebook, believe it or not, and try to
Mm.
more Skype and Zoom with people. But it's hard, especially if certain people they're not partnered. So they're really, really lonely.
Mm.
And they don't have anybody who they can be in physical contact with. And so that can be really tough for them, I think. But I think you have to really take steps and reach out to people and realize that people, let's say you have a good network. I think it's good to think about the people you know that might not have that good of a network and maybe give them an extra call, check in on them.
Especially
Because
elderly people. And
absolutely, at least in the States, I don't think we treat our elderly people very nice, and they're very, very isolated. And with what we know about fear and stress and how these things increase risk of suicide, we have increases in elderly suicides in the US. I don't think about COVID. We don't have that data yet, but just in general, because, we're social creatures. Even the most sort of hard-minded kind of individual, I think we all need people, and it always feels good to be able to connect and share things with people. There are some disorders where they don't feel that way, but they're certainly in the minority.
So that's basically on the do's side of the thing,
Yeah.
right? Because, yeah, obviously talking to people, even on Skype, it looks like it's helping. I mean, at least for me, I mean,
Yeah.
I've already did a bunch of online dinners, which is kind
Hmm.
of, you know, it has an aesthetic, but it was kind of fun.
Yeah.
But what about the other parts? Let's say you're alone at home. You're not married. You don't have kids,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
With all the baggage that comes as well.
Mhm.
But when you're alone, you get to do weird shit. I mean,
You
I've been 20 years old as well, just going to university and just stay alone at home and play video games essentially.
do. Hmm. Hmm.
So I'm guessing there's a bunch of things that are probably not an amazing idea. Probably gaming all the time isn't optimal. Probably drinking all the time is suboptimal as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Really just not using your time wisely. If we don't feel like we're doing something, it feels very bad. So a lot of people in the US at least are really out of work, and a classic study going back to 1967, I think, showed that losing your job was as stressful and emotionally draining as if you lost your best friend.
Hmm.
So I think there's a lot of people now that are not only alone, but they're also dealing with that. And so I think if you fall into despair and depression and just don't do anything, you make yourself worse. We know from tons and tons of studies that the quickest way to sort of stop depression getting worse, notice I didn't say get better, but stop it from getting worse, is doing something. If you can stop that chain of thoughts that you have when you're just ruminating and going over how terrible you are, all the mistakes you made, if you can do anything to get out of that, you are going to make it easier on yourself. And, let's say you did lose your job. I think this is the time to really try and build up your skills to be more marketable. So like I one of the people I'm working with is in the health field, and she was laid off. So she's actually doing continuing education courses to learn new skills and get more certifications online. So when she goes back, she's going in the market, she's going to be more competitive.
Hmm.
Easiest thing in the world for her would just be to sit around and do nothing and feel about how much of a loser she is because she doesn't have a job, right? But is that going to be helpful? No, I don't think so. So yeah, just we don't do well with unstructured time for big chunks. It's nice, I got to say, like for spring break and stuff when we get summer breaks, it's really nice to just not have a to-do list in front of you and just relax. But after a
Travel to
few
Bulgaria.
days, exactly, yeah, that's fun. And you get Lucina and lots of good stuff. But yeah, so those are some things that I would say aren't helpful.
But let's say you, end of the day, think you are doing some of those things and you're not feeling
Mhm.
amazing. I mean, what would you do to evaluate that you're not doing well?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question. So this is where you need to have some awareness of yourself. So the early warning signs that something's wrong, usually it's going to hit you in sort of your core areas. So your sleep. Are you sleeping more than you used to? Are you sleeping less than you used to? Both, strangely enough, could be symptoms of depression, but they're different types of depression. So atypical versus typical. Look at your libido. Is your libido going down? That's another sign that things could be off. Your appetite. Some people, this is correlated with sleep, but people that tend to sleep more when they're depressed tend to eat more, and people that tend to eat less sleep less. So the less is typical depression, the more is atypical. So if you notice those things, that's a sign you might be in getting into depressive symptoms, not necessarily depression, because you need to have these things steady for at least 2 weeks. You have to have at least 5 symptoms. I don't want to go and bore your audience with all the criteria, but things like sleeping, eating, changes in libido, all those things. Also, if you find yourself having really disturbing thoughts that you wouldn't normally have, depressive thoughts that go into suicidality, that's probably a good sign that you might need to reach out to somebody and get some help. And from what one of the Ratio folks said, there are folks offering free psychotherapy online right now in Bulgaria. So, if it's just sort of mild stuff, the first thing I would recommend is trying to get more active and try to do some things.
Just physically active, just train.
Physically active, mentally active, feel like you're accomplishing something. The way I phrased to one of my patients, I said, do you remember when you were in school and you were in the most god-awful, boring class, whether it was history or geometry or whatever? If you could go back to that moment, what did you want to do other than that? And then, I wanted to paint, or I wanted to learn how to play guitar. I said, just fucking do that. I mean, I'll bet when you were working 80 hours a week and you were really stressed out, you were like, oh my God, I wish I had free time on my hands so I could do some of the things that really matter to me. And then we get to that place and nobody wants to do it. They just want to feel bad about that they can't do what they were doing before that they were complaining about. I see these things as being very, I think this could, if you reframe it in your head, it's a good opportunity. If I didn't have COVID right now, I would not have been able to spend as much time reading and doing background research for my new book as I would have if I wasn't in COVID. So that it's actually in that piece of my life, it's been a plus. There's other ways it's been a really bad negative, but I think it can be helpful.
We recently had a podcast with a psychologist. Yeah, I talked to other psychologists who aren't you as well. I'm literally psychology cheating on you.
I don't take it personally.
Yes. So we were actually talking about the reluctance, or rather the lack of awareness that potentially psychotherapy works. I'm hugely skeptical in general. You know me.
Yeah, I know.
But it
you haven't
seems
read the stuff. I know.
Yes. It seems like I'm not the only one, at least regionally. I mean, in Bulgaria, we seem to be rather skeptical regarding psychoanalysis. I don't know why. Probably
Well, it was
some
illegal
communist
until
reason.
the 80s, actually. You
Really?
couldn't get the books from... I was talking to a psychologist at the one event, and they said Freud was actually banned.
Okay,
and we've had a lot of development since Freud, believe me. But,
so my question is related to the fact that, let's say you do that mini checklists with the sleep, with the eating disorder, potentially, etc., and you end up on some kind of spectrum of depression, let's say, according to those preliminary indications.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you're skeptical about it, if you're not sure psychotherapy is something that actually works, I mean, what would convince you? I mean, what would be the thing that would allow for somebody to actually try it out anyway?
Yeah, I guess it would depend where the reluctance was coming from. If it was coming from a place of not working, I think all you'd have to do was do a cursory internet search on the effectiveness of psychotherapy, and you'd see that there are dozens, if not hundreds, of not just individual studies, but meta-analyses where you aggregate say anywhere from 15 to 300 studies and get them all in the same metric and see, okay, does this approach work versus this approach? Does it work versus placebo? Things like that. So I think that's pretty easy to dissuade. But a lot of people I've noticed that are reluctant to pursue psychotherapy when they're hurting. Some of them are afraid that they're going to find something out that they don't want to know. And so they're kind of averse to the process of introspection, or they have a vague sense something is wrong, but they don't really want to know what it is. But from my perspective, I think it's better to know what's going on than to not know. And it's scary. And your therapist is not going to go from 0 to 60 the first 50 minutes. You know, one of the things.
Tell me about your mother.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, one of the things that we struggle with as therapists is knowing the right pace for a patient, because we want them to progress. We don't want them to be lazy in therapy, shall we say, and not be pushing forward. But we also don't want to push too fast that they're terribly uncomfortable and it's causing them to have all sorts of reactions in their life. I mean, two of the main criteria for whether you are going to meet disorder criteria are, is it impacting on your life and is it distressing you? We don't want to increase that by pushing you into places you don't want to go. And there's a lot of quick therapies that aren't in the classic sense of talking about your early traumas, talking about your mothers. One type I do is called cognitive therapy, which really spends most of the time looking at your thoughts and how you're thinking and the ways that you're thinking, how they're impacting on your mood and your behaviors. And I got to tell you, everybody, not me too, can think in ways that make us miserable. Yeah. We can sort of evaluate ourselves very poorly, like, oh God, like let's say I was really neurotic. Oh God, I sounded so stupid on that podcast with Lubo, and I forgot to cite this study and that. And if I keep doing that to myself, how am I going to feel inside? It's obviously going to impact. Up. It's going to wind me up. It's going to make me feel bad. And it's also going to have a behavioral change possibly where I won't want to do another podcast. Or I might just want to go upstairs and lie in bed and cry or something. You know what I mean? So our thoughts are really powerful. And I got to say, a lot of self-help books are bullshit. But there's a really good one by David Burns called The Feeling Good Handbook that actually teaches you some of these things on how to alter your thinking so that you have less pain and you are treating yourself. It's ways to treat yourself less poorly, shall we say. And it's a legitimately good self-help book for people that aren't really that bad in terms of depression or anxiety, but it's kind of a thing that can be very helpful.
Just having a more charitable disposition toward yourself, essentially.
Yes, and to see the world more realistically. Another misconception about psychotherapy is that it's all like lovey-dovey and you get in touch with your feelings, man, everything's fine. It's not the way at all. I think it's just as bad to see, yeah, you know that about me, but I think it's just as bad to see the world through rose-colored glasses as it is through dirt-colored glasses. You're still not seeing the world accurately. You want to be able to see clearly and see the good and the bad, not just about the world, but about yourself. And so all the psychotherapies really, I think, all the major forms of psychotherapy want you to be more realistic in how you're appraising the world and yourself. And it's fun.
Okay. So Brian, I think we passed the 1 hour mark. I think we should get some questions from the audience. Yes. Just a reminder for everybody, you can ask your questions at sly.do with the code, what was it? Coping. You can see it actually underneath the thing, I think. Hopefully, I can't see it myself, so I'm really hoping this works. Yes. So I'm going to start with my favorite question. It's basically my favorite question because it involves me. So, Brian, how would you analyze Lubo's nonverbal behavior in front of the camera? He's unconsciously touching his face, neck, mimics, etc. Question mark, winky face.
I think he's having a lot of fun talking to me. That's how I interpret it.
I'm just getting all bothered and interested.
He likes to see himself in the mirror.
Yes, I have everything turned off. I'm just looking at myself. It's really good.
Yeah.
Yes, it's amazing. So back to the actual questions. By a concerned citizen, in the spirit of physical distancing, we are actively building a paranoid fear towards people around. Do you think that this will lead to chronic alienation in the long term?
It could at an individual level. I mean, if you're really, again, if you're before the pandemic more of a suspicious person and view people in negative ways, people are threats as opposed to neutral, possibly threats, possibly nice people, I think that could get worse, and that might very well stick with you. And once the things get relaxed and you can go about your day more, you might be a little bit more hesitant to really engage in public life as much as you might have before. I think it's going to be a shock for the system, and I have no idea what's going to happen in terms of work. I mean, I'm fascinated to see if like big office buildings are just going to be empty now because they realize they don't have to pay for overhead to have for their employees.
No, especially if it works for the employers.
Yeah, exactly.
If productivity doesn't drop.
Yeah, but I think if it doesn't go on for too long, I think it will be pretty easy to snap back. And I mean, think about it. What's the first thing you're going to do once it's lifted?
I'm actually going to go drink outside for days. Yes.
I'm going to go on a trip. I had 2 trips canceled because of this damn COVID. So I'm
actually
going to France.
For Sicily, by the way.
Yeah.
Yes.
That'd be fantastic.
In middle of April, actually. Yeah. Right about now. So,
yeah, I should have been in France in early April, but alas. Yeah.
Well, you could have been in Bulgaria as well.
That's a good place too.
Let's go back to some of the questions. One is related to marital distress. So the question is, do you think it's possible to realize that your partner is not what you want and divorce during or after the pandemic, and why?
Well, I mean, you are getting information and you're spending more time together, so you might observe things, but I think it's important to also realize that they might not be in their normal state. So as I said, people tend to have intensifications of their personality traits when they're under distress. So they might be a bit more normal after the pandemic, and it's up to you. I don't want to give advice on whether to get divorced or married, but you will definitely get information about
pictures
the other person.
first. And
exactly.
We'll decide. We'll vote. Yay or nay.
We'll hold a poll. Yeah. But I think it goes to another, can I kind of go off that question a bit? I think that it's been really hard on some couples that are now in each other's hair, so to speak, not me, of course, or you, but we're prepared for the pandemic. We don't need barbers. We're way more ready for this than most people. But I think in general, people have been fighting a lot more. And an easy thing that people can do, and this is going to sound stupid, but I can guarantee it works, is typically a relationship has a pattern in a fight. One person wants to resolve the fight and get closer and closer until resolution. Another person wants to pull away and just go away from the fight. And so what happens? So then the person who wants to get closer and get it resolved starts getting even more pushy, and the other person gets more withdrawn. You see that, and it switches genders. It doesn't, but the pattern's very similar in relationships. So I would recommend everybody out there have a conversation with their partner about if they fight, what they're going to do with this, and make an agreement. Say, okay, I know that when we fight, I want to withdraw. I want to go away. And you're going to let me do that for a bit. But I guarantee that in like 20 minutes or an hour, I will come back and we will flesh it out. So each person gets something that they want, and it stops that problematic behavior, which just tends to make it worse.
That stops escalation, essentially.
Exactly. And it's an easy thing to do that I would suggest if I wasn't giving medical advice, because this is purely for entertainment, of course.
I don't know, my experience is just starting to throw things immediately helps.
You can do that. Yeah. It's again, it gets more information. Yes. Not as if the poor woman doesn't have enough information.
Yes. Terabytes.
Yep.
So
terabytes.
We have a question that's terabytes. We have another question that I'll actually split into two. So the question is, how can anyone determine what is the right approach in a new situation? How can one believe any authority is making the right decisions for the pandemic? So let me
Oof.
let me be able to split this into bits. So the first is, obviously, should we trust authorities in general right now, our governments, etc.? WHO, governments who are taking different measures in each country are sometimes contradicting,
Mhm.
sometimes strange in their requests, or they're too stringent or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's one of the questions. And the second I'd like to rephrase a bit is, should you what is the amount of freedom, according to you, that you should waive in the benefits of those organizations? Because end of the day, trust allows you to give that freedom away, right? So what do you
Mhm.
think is the healthy center there? Is it the healthy center? Is it something that should be pumped to the max? Should we be ever skeptical or ever obliging?
Yeah, boy. Well, first off, I'm a psychologist, not a politician. But I think in general we should be very cautious of giving away our freedoms. But it's you have two things in conflict for me. One is my desire that people should be able to do what they want as long as they're not hurting other people. Um, and actually, there's the conflict because there's the potential to hurt other people if you have too much freedom in the situation. So I don't know really what the balance is. I'm glad I'm actually not in a position of authority to have to make that decision. No, seriously, like I tried to put myself in the
Hmm.
place of, let's say I'm running a country and
Which one?
uh, pick one, Latvia. Let's say I'm
Azerbaijan.
running Latvia. So, I know that a certain percentage of the population is going to die. So if I were to put everybody in complete isolation, have them locked in their homes, we'll limit the death. But that will cause the economy to go into depression. And we know that lots of people die when there are depressions. So how do you figure it out? I wish I had an answer. I don't. I'm just so glad I
Hmm.
don't have to make that decision. Um, in terms of how to trust them, I think you have to look towards what they're doing and not what they're saying. Spin is so important in politics, and I don't know why people can't do this, but I think the leaders that don't talk to us like children, I think are the ones we need. I see so much of candy coating the truth and not telling us hard messages. And I think that creates a general distrust that even if they're saying some other things that are right, it makes us want to discount them because we know deep down something doesn't sound right. Um, so I think our leaders, if anything, should be absolutely transparent, even if it's going to be terrible.
Hmm.
Um, like the leaders that were on us saying, look, people are going to die because of this, like right before the deaths even happened. I was like, wow, that's actually a good way to go. Because if you just say, oh no, everything's going to be fine, it's just going to
Yeah,
be a
it's
little
more
bit of a
honest.
hassle.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you tell them, look, people are going to die and it's going to be pretty bad. Um, I think that's helpful. And I was thinking about that in terms of the talk. I know a little bit about Bulgarian history and my visits there. And I was thinking to myself, you guys have got through a lot harder things than the COVID, if you look over time. So I
Probably
think you
not
could
me
keep
though,
that
but
in
yeah.
mind. So there's a resilience to the people that I think should be acknowledged, that you
Hmm.
can deal with things, and we all can deal with things. And if our leaders would treat us like adults and not children and give us good information, um, I think we would, one, trust them more, and two, potentially follow along with the guidelines better because we feel like they make sense, they're consistent, and we might even have a personal investment in it
Hmm.
because it makes sense. And it's like, oh, okay, I get it. So if I do this, then this won't happen, you know?
So you think that a kind of radical honesty is a consistently better approach in convincing people long term?
I think so, because once people find out that you shaded the truth with them, they, like giving a talk. You see lots of talks. If you have a speaker up there that they get a question and they answer it, and you think it's bullshit, but they answered it like it was truth. Doesn't it make you discount a little bit the rest of the things they say?
Yeah, I
Don't you
stopped
respect
listening
it
to
more?
you after 5 minutes, basically.
Exactly. It's wise. But if you say, I don't know that, or there's no data on that, it makes you, I think, trust them more. And I think our politicians, I would recommend they do that rather than
Let,
candy coat or
let me
lie.
let me just dig down on this question a bit more. So let's imagine a hypothetical. If you have, like, let's say, a patient that comes to you and says, "Look, Brian,
Mhm.
because of what Trump is doing, I'm actually gonna go and I'm gonna build a bunker. I'm gonna stock up with weapons, with dry jerky. I'm gonna prepare myself to live there for 50 years to come out of the virus/nuclear fallout that is surely to follow.
Mhm.
And this is, I think, rational based on the information I'm getting from the media right now.
Mhm.
So would you try to combat this, or would you say this is behavior in line with distrusting?
Yeah, that's a great question. This actually ties into what we know from conspiracy theories research. In general, in psychotherapy, the way I approach it, I rarely tell somebody what to do. If they tell me they're going to kill themselves, I don't do that. But in general, I want people to get to build up their own sense of agency and their ability to make decisions. So people do have a lot of weird ideas that might be maladaptive. So I would start asking questions. I would ask questions. Okay, tell me more. How do you think this will help? Are there downsides? What are the upsides to this? What are you trying to avoid? And have them get more awareness of why they're actually trying to do these things, and to see if it actually makes sense. If you go at a belief directly, like you have a delusional person, they believe that CIA is out to get them. What do you think's going to happen if I say, the CIA doesn't care about you. They're not after you. They're going to double down on their beliefs. There's a little bit of data on this. It's called a rebound, I think, a rebound effect. Where the belief actually strengthens you if you challenge it. But it also will end up working the person who's challenging them into the conspiracy sometimes. So a lot of early therapists working with schizophrenics, they became wrapped up in their delusional network because they didn't know how to really have a conversation about these things without either accepting the delusion as true or trying to dispute it as false. Instead, you have to ask good questions and encourage their own, what we call reality testing, where they can more objectively evaluate what's going on in themselves and the world, and have them see that it might be different. But you can't directly challenge these things and have them be successful unless they're sort of new to the belief. So let's say one of your friends, yeah, I heard this interesting conspiracy theory about COVID. There you can be a little more direct, but even in a new conspiracy theorist, you really want to kind of present the counter evidence. So say, yeah, I could see how you could think that, but it's a bit inconsistent with X, Y, and Z. Like anti-vaccination people. If someone just is new to this, they might think, well, vaccines aren't really that safe. They've got all these chemicals, and they're all the studies were done by drug companies. So they, of course, have a vested interest in this. If you show, well, actually, the independent researchers who weren't getting any money from them at all actually came to the same conclusion, that might make them stop and think, but if you have a die-hard conspiracy theorist, it's not going to work. And really, I'm less optimistic that there are ways to quickly get them out of that.
So basically, it's a more indirect approach to allow an internal monologue in the person's head to be able to go through the decision he already made, or the concept he created, to basically allow him to consider it once again, rather than have a discussion where you confront him on specific points.
Yeah, it's more of in line with a Socratic method than just a lecture method. Just telling someone this is what you should think. Well, ask questions. Okay, well, let's look at that. What's the evidence for that? Okay, and don't omit the good sides, because most conspiracy theories do give us something good. Like, let's say you think that you're being followed by the CIA or extraterrestrials or something. that gives you a lot of bad stuff because you're scared a lot of the time. But think about the good stuff it gives you. It gives you a sense that you're special in some way.
Yeah, you're
You're
in the know.
important. You're important. You might know things that other people don't know. Exactly. So I think you have to be open to both the good and the bad sides of those things if you want to have a possible chance of changing the maladaptive belief.
Hmm. Okay, so we have a bunch more questions. So let's try and focus on a few of those because we probably won't be able to ask all of them. One is really cool, by the way. It's kind of the opposite of what we were talking about. Let's say when you have some indication of depression, you're not doing much, you're not moving much, hence you might get depressed. So we have like the opposite of this. I'm not sure this is an actual use case, but the question is, it's good to focus on improving, but if you're spinning your wheels all the time, is this a form of highly functioning depression? Do we also need to stay still? And I'd like to focus on that second part. I mean, is there some benefits to, rather than trying all the time to, get better stuff, do online courses, etc.
You could
Does
obviously do too
this?
much of anything, right?
Yeah. I mean, I have friends who are basically addicted to doing online courses halfway. Literally just online courses like at the beginning or halfway and just telling me about the next course, which is kind of
it's weird.
alarming.
Yep. Yeah, as with everything, moderation is the key. So you don't want to spend all your time doing nothing, and you don't want to spend all your time doing everything either. I struggle more with the latter. It's hard for me to do nothing, but so I might tend to overextend myself with projects, which isn't good either. And I have enough self-awareness to know that, but I still do it, so that tells I have limited self-awareness. But getting back to the question, I think, the place where when you're in the present, you're not anxious and you're not depressed. You're just in the present. By definition, anxiety is worrying about something in the future that hasn't occurred yet, and depression is thinking about something that already happened that you can't change. So if you can be in the present for part of the time, and this is where mindfulness comes in. Mindfulness is very popular. In the States, at least, I think it's extremely popular. I don't see it as something that can cure everything. Some people take it a bit too far, but there are useful tasks where there are lots of exercises you can find online about being more in the present moment and kind of having those moments of quietude and relaxation that aren't projecting into the future, into these places and events that haven't happened, or going into the past and all these things that have happened we can't do anything about. So I mean, I think it's great. I mean, that's why we take vacations, isn't it? To get away from everything we know and everything we need to work on and just kind of relax and hang out, go see old ruined castles, go to wineries. That's what I do. And get out of my head. I got to tell you, when I went to Proportionality on my last visit to Bulgaria, I actually made a Facebook post about this. When I was in the center of the complex, I realized I went 10 minutes without having a single stupid thought in my head. I was just kind of in there, in the vibe of it. It was really amazing to kind of immerse myself in something that wasn't work related.
Yeah, well, you're rediscovering the joys of vacation, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a bundle of questions which I think work really well together. They're basically on the same vein of, let's say, relationship harmony. One is really good, really positive. Which is worse, fighting with a person all the time or not speaking at all? Because those are the options. You don't get to say none of these. There's a bunch of which is worse.
I feel fine in my autonomy, so I can say what I want. Both are obviously not good. I mean, I don't know. If you're fighting, you're at least talking. So I guess there's a possibility to have something shift versus not talking is a complete absence of connection. So I guess if push came to shove, fighting. But I mean, obviously, neither are good. I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah, it depends how you're fighting. I mean, if it has knives
That's
and
not
some
good.
sharp object, yeah, probably less optimal.
Yeah. If just
Spikes.
like fighting over whether you watch the World War I documentary or World War II documentary, it's probably not not as serious. Yeah.
But it sounds essential though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, did you watch the World War One documentary,
I
Brian?
just finished
Did
it.
you?
Yeah, I did. It was incredible and it was kind of hard to watch, I gotta say.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was intense. The one through it wasn't BBC, but some British company did. It was amazing.
Yeah, that was actually that's a
Yeah,
never mind.
yeah.
Never
We
mind.
thought we were on EPUB.
Yes. I'll tell you afterwards. There's a really good podcast about history. Anyway, the other question that's kind of related to this is the fact that people sometimes show more irritability, spite, etc. They're less prone to actually talking. Is it something that you see in your partner that's always been there, or is it a product of isolation in particular?
I don't see why it couldn't be both. I mean, if your mood is already bad, you're going to be primed to experience that person in more of a negative light than you would be if your mood was good. And familiarity, the old phrase is familiarity breeds contempt, meaning the more you are around with people, the more you don't like them. I think at a time like this, it's good to actually step back and think about why you actually are with your partner and what you like about them. You know, it's a lot easier, especially if you're living with someone, and we all can relate to this, I'm sure, at some point in our lives, to see what drives you absolutely crazy, what makes you nuts, some little quirk they do that drives you crazy. But if you step back and think, well, what do I really like about them? Well, here's one. This is one you actually get from Stoicism. So we're talking like Roman times, but a Stoic technique was to imagine what it would be like if your partner was dead. What would you miss about them? And that's a dark thought experiment, but I think it's a powerful one. And if you really sit with that thought, like, what if this person wasn't here? And see what comes to your mind. You might find out that there are things that you really do like about them. But then again, you could find out that there's very little you like and you wish you would be rid of them, not dead, but that they wouldn't. You might find out you don't like much about them and you're really with them for some other reason that isn't healthy.
You said really quickly, no, no.
Yeah. Well, I don't want anybody killing anybody.
Okay, Brian, we have a bunch more questions. Let's just go with one more for like a final wrap up. And it's, let's see which one. There's a bunch of good ones. So,
I don't like mischievous smiles on you, so.
Yes. No, there's one that's obviously a favorite of mine, which is Who Killed Laura Palmer, which I was hoping that you can shed some light on this, but yeah,
I never actually watched that show.
Jesus,
I know, man. It's shocking. I know.
I mean, you basically have the time to do it now.
I could, yeah,
but you wouldn't. So let's go with a more abstract one. It isn't specifically, I think, related to social distancing, but let's go with it. Which is the most likely psychological condition to be triggered in the period of physical distancing combined with the fear of the disease? So, I mean, I would extend this a bit really to be whether it's some kind of global crisis, let's say war, or some other financial crisis. I mean, is it identical? Are there different kind of exhibited abnormalities during different crises, or is it the same thing?
Boy, that's a really deep question. We need an hour to talk about that. There are some disorders that only tend to occur during the most at certain times of upheaval. So during wars, you see a lot of what are called dissociative fugue states. So it's a fancy way of saying you essentially lost memory of who you are. So I don't know if you ever saw the first season of 24, but Jack's wife actually went into a fugue state. So you tend to only see those at wartime or sometimes in really bad natural disasters, but they're very rare otherwise. In terms of the pandemic right now, what I would predict, apart from a general increase in anxiety and depression, would be heightened levels of obsessive-compulsive disorder with contamination fears. So obsessive-compulsive disorder is repetitive thoughts or actions that you do, and if you don't do them, you feel incredibly anxious. So A contamination fear would be that you feel that your hands are always dirty or a part of your body is always dirty and you have to wash them for more than an hour a day. Okay. And there are people that spend like 6-7 hours a day in some sort of cleaning ritual because they feel that they're infected. So I could see with the legitimate fears that we have and, government agencies telling us to scrub things down when we bring them in the house, to wash our hands when we don't have gloves on, I could see that increasing the risk of and the prevalence rate overall of obsessive compulsive disorder. And there also are sort of just germ phobias. So you can have phobias for just about anything, for dogs, for water. In Sweden, they have a lot of yogurt phobias, believe it or not, in children because they serve yogurt for lunches and breakfasts. But we don't want to go on off tirade about that. But so yeah, you can get phobias for just about anything. So I could easily foresee people getting conditioned fear responses to people in masks, for instance, or seeing people wearing gloves. I could see stuff like that happening too. But I would guess OCD is going to get higher.
Yeah, it sounds logical. There's a bunch more questions left. Maybe if you have the time, we can answer them in the event. Just post them after the event. There's also a few questions related to a book you mentioned during the episodes, and some possibly online tests which are for resilience, flexibility that you mentioned, etc. Maybe it would be optimal if we collect all of this information in some
that's fine, sure,
easily, readily shape or form, and just give it to people. Okay, man, this has been like an hour and a half. So
all right,
I think it's time for us to cut.
I got a patient and a half hour, I think. So yeah, all right.
Yes. Well, thanks for putting me in your schedule, and I
My
hope it was fun for you as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's really hope you can come back to Bulgaria ASAP.
I hope so too. I have a really fun talk on narcissism and conspiracy theories I want to give. So
why did you point at me when you said that? I mean,
I pointed at the camera.
Jesus.
You're so paranoid.
Yes. Who said that? Yeah. Okay, man. Thanks a bunch, and good luck with doing the mishmash right.
I will do my best. Tackling Lucina next.
Lutenica.
Lutenica, god damn it.
Lutenica, yes. Okay, so let me wrap this up in Bulgarian.
Yep.
Хора, благодаря, че ни слушахте в продължение на час и половина. Надявам се да ви е било интересно. Както виждате, малко скачаме от тема в тема. Надявам се да е било достатъчно динамично, така че да задържа внимание. На тръгване искам само да спомена няколко неща. Едно от нещата, които може би сте видели, е супер яката визия, която беше на ивента, която една от дизайнерките ни, Дана Тилева, тя даже има и фамилия, е направила. Ако ви е харесало също и на вас този дизайн, можете да си го вземете от нашия магазин shop.ratio.bg. Да се вика, едно от 20-те неща, които продаваме. Тази тениска е доста яка. Не си взимайте само от бялата с червено, защото искам само аз да имам, другата, защото според мен е по-смотана. Така че да. Едно от другите неща, което искам да ви кажа, е, че след една седмица точно по-добрата ми половинка Петко Желязов ще води събитието в търсене на планетата Хикс. Поредният ни ивент, който е за космос. Силно ви препоръчвам да се включите и да го чекнете и него. Ще бъде с един отново наш стар лектор, съответно ще е доста епично. Силно препоръчвам. Също така, може би вече ми се схвана устата да казвам едно и също нещо на всеки подкаст, ивент и така нататък, но е практически истина. Силно благодарим на всички хора, които ни подкрепят в Patreon. В patreon.com/ratiobg. Към момента вече имаме над 40 нещо души. Трябва да чекна, мисля, че може би 45, нещо този порядък. Надявам се, ако на вас това ви е харесало или съответно ако харесате някои от другите неща, които правим, примерно други ивенти, подкасти и така нататък, един от начините, по които може да ни съпортите в това странно време е като ни сабскрайбнете към нашия Patreon. Така и, говорейки за подкасти, сигурно сте забелязали, че напоследък сме притеснително продуктивни с серия различни епизоди, които пускаме всяка седмица. Почти по 3 епизода се опитаме да пускаме на седмица в момента. Те са в 3 основни наратива. Едното е интервюта, сходни на събитието, което направихме днес, където си говорим с един наш лектор на някаква конкретна интересна тема. Вторият тип е седмичен обзор, където си говорим за събитията, които се случват в момента покрай коронавируса, както и други актуални научни новини, както и интересни факти. Никола сигурно пак ще спомене за някакви пингвини или там някакви риби, които скачат птици. Е някакъв ужас. И съответно, третото ни проявление на подкаста е широко скорения Стоян Ставро с неговата серия Vox Nihili. Заедно с Стоян правим малко по-страничен формат от това, което правим с Рацио. Там повече включваме теми, свързани с философия, с право, с етика, допирните им точки с технологии, наука и така нататък. И е доста яко в интерес на истината. Там 3-4 епизода допълнително, така че нямаме търпение да ги пуснем съвсем скоро. Последният ни епизод беше за секс кукли, където мисля, че е любимият епизод на Стоян, главно заради секс куклите. Няма някаква друга причина. Така че чекнете ги, мисля, че някои от тях ще са ви доста интересни. Така, докъде бяхме стигнали? Да, едно от нещата, които е полезно да чекнете, е нашия уебсайт, където освен магазин имаме и серия други неща. Едно от най-важните са видеята ни. Ratio.bg/videos. Там реално имаме практически 90% от събитията, които са се случвали през последните вече колко години? 8 години? Някъде около 8 години. Сме ги записвали. Искаме да твърдим, че по-скоро в читаво качество сме го правили, когато сме можели. Но примерно големите ни събития са с доста добър продъкшън. Ако ви е интересно да виждате повече такова съдържание, като това, което чухте днес, както и евентуално малко по-добро, с по-добър водещ, имаме серия събития, включая това от ноември миналата година, чекнете го на Ratio.bg. И да не забравяте, също в Ratio.bg имаме много други неща. Цялата тази информация, която ви изсипах в момента неволево от ваша страна, за видеята, за магазина, за подкастите, за тези събития, които очакваме в момента, може да намерите в нашия сайт. Опитаме се да го обновяваме максимално бързо. Има към момента една тумба доброволци, която ни помага с адекватното пускане на съдържание и подбирането на подходящо съдържание в момента всяка седмица, така че check it out. И това мисля, че е цялото нещо. Това аутро почна да става супер дълго вече. Надявам се да ви е било интересно и ще се видим следващия път. Нови срещи!